and wholesale distribution. So Adam, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for making the time today. My name is Adam Lethlean, and today we'll be presenting part 2 of our series on the picking jungle. Before we start today's webinar, I'll take a moment to introduce you to what we believe the picking jungle is, why we're talking about it, and follow up with a quick recap on what we've discussed in the first webinar. So, the picking jungle is a phrase that we've adopted that we feel describes a somewhat lost and overwhelmed feeling that we might experience due to the large number of choices available to us to get stock out the door efficiently, effectively, accurately, and on time. That gives us the best chance to deliver great customer service and be profitable. The picking jungle includes your people, your processes, your systems, and your physical environment. So by default, the path through your picking jungle will be unique to you. The evolution of the picking jungle has come about as a result of the e-commerce explosion, and it's continually changing with technology playing a defining role with customers' purchasing behaviours and their expectations. We've all seen shopping carts on websites, apps for our smartphones. EDI is commonplace between suppliers and retailers these days. But today, an increasing convergence of systems to satisfy the customer are evolving. The B2B2C, where a point of sale system integrates with an ERP system of a supplier that then triggers distribution to that person's place of work or home. The impact of this is easy to see. The order sizes are smaller and the increased shipping frequency is occurring. One moment. In the first webinar, we introduced you to the idea of the picking jungle. We asked you to take the roof off your warehouse and look at the flow of your inventory across your floor. Which way is everything moving? Is it moving in the same direction? Is it looking efficient? We suggested you think of this as a process, like Eli Goldratt's theory of constraints. Know where the bottlenecks are in your organisation and build a buffer around them, your pickers and your processes moving. I've already mentioned people and processes and systems are the tools that move your stock. Well, these mechanisms are at your disposal, and so the path through your jungle involves the management of these levers to achieve an optimal throughput. We discussed building density across your operation. Maybe that's by order size, by customer, by product type, or by removing empty travel as a concept of building this density, you build efficiencies which lead to cost savings and higher throughput. We asked you to do some homework on your order profile, average line numbers per order, average pieces, average volume, the volume, what the expected turnaround time is, and most importantly, what's the trend happening with your products. This will have an impact on how your physical layout is utilised and feeds into today's topic on wave releasing. And finally, we asked you to understand your dispatch methods. Are they full truckloads? Are they less than truckloads? Where are they going to? In what quantities? And in what frequencies? Understanding this information will allow you to better manage how you pick, pack and ship the most efficiently and increase your throughput. Before we get into today's topic, and I hand over to our subject matter expert, Lloyd Hussey, we'd like to poll the audience on 2 simple questions. We're going to give you a moment or 2 to do this and fill out this on screen, and we'll be able to share these results with you during the webinar, and they'll help us direct the conversation. We'll also get a result today, which is a bit unlike the election on Saturday. So if you take a moment to fill those out, and I'll start the process of handing over to Lloyd. Over the last 20 years, Lloyd has worked both supplier and customer side of warehouse management systems, including tier 1 vendors and been employed by blue chip employers. He commenced his involvement in the industry with an RF gun on a forklift and worked his way up through the business through implementations and being the implementation manager of a WMS consultancy. What people are less familiar with is Lloyd's love of vanilla slices and his near miss with becoming a New Zealand Air Force cadet in the 1990s. Today, he's the equivalent of a master chef judge on both vanilla slices and aircraft landings, making him an interesting guy to fly with. I'll pass the baton over to Lloyd now and leave you in his experienced hands.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Peter, as well. And welcome everyone to webinar 2 for the Picking Jungle. Just give you a few more moments to finish poll question number 2, one of the picking methods that we've got today. Do thank you, Adam, for the kind introduction. And just by way of vanilla slices, there is a National Australian Vanilla Slice Championship every year. It's held in regional Victoria. It's at the end of August, I believe. We were trying to get the hashtag landing critics going as well. So I'm sure for all of you people who are frequent flyers, you'll understand that a bit too much bounce, a bit too much left, a bit too much right can often affect the landing. So I do invite you to become your own landing critic. If you wish to talk to us through hashtags landing critic, that might be an amusing way to get going through Twitter. There's my smiling face behind the microphone to give you an idea of who's actually doing the talking. Adam's been through my experience, and as he said, I've worked both sides of the industry, literally started out with an RF gun in my hand, from the ground up on the floor, saw a lot of stuff on the way through, and the Picking Jungle has really just become a culmination of those nearly 20 years of my observations, learnings through both WMS and implementation, as well as operation side approach. We're going to start today by delving through the tactics and tools as a little bit of a background for what we've talked about. As Adam mentioned in Picking Jungle number 1, we talked about the theory of constraints to start to build some framework and give you guys some tools to how to go about looking at your jungle and actually trying to trim it into shape. So today we'll start with, again, the tactics and tools to keep in mind, to start to introduce you to some topics, probably reinforce some of the topics that you've probably already heard. Tactic number 1. Map the current state. Now, mapping the current state, use some great tools, value stream mapping. Now, up comes a little graphic. It'll disappear quite quickly. Unfortunately, we haven't got the time today to go into a lot of detail for some of these things, but that will give you an idea of what you're going to look for. Get on the internet and have a look. What the value stream map does is the 2 key parts listed there. It shows you where your value add and your non-value add activities are. And again, tools to then help you start to look and say, how do we trim this jungle into shape? How do we get the best out of what we've got? The value stream map is going to give you an identify the area for improvement, which then brings us to tactic number 2. Identify the specific improvement. Once we know where to look, what exactly do we need to do? Use 5S system and 8 wastes. Go online. There's lots and lots of material about it. There's lots of stuff out there on these lean concepts. They help you to organize and prepare the physical space to help you look around your operations and your warehouses and help you identify the areas of improvements that you need. If you're sitting there now, take a quick glance out your window and look at your warehouse and start to think, how would I prepare it? Or look and think, okay, if I'm in my office, think about where your warehouse is, think about your physical space and say, what could I do to improve? And again, all of that starts to help you to look and improve the jungle that is actually out there. And the last one is implement frequent small improvements. Don't save this stuff up and do it once a year. Don't save this stuff up and do it once a month. Use, and I do apologize for all of you Kaizen experts out there, a very, very simplified explanation of Kaizen. Essentially standardize it, innovate it, and standardize it. But go and look at these 3. Go and look at your value stream maps. Look at where you add the value. Look at where you don't. How long does a task take and how long do I spend actually touching what I need to touch versus how long does it sit and wait around? Ultimately, the value stream map will drive out to your customer what their expectations are, and it will bring you all the way back and say, look, right here, we add no value to our customer, and here we add heaps of value. I'd like to tell you that it can all be turned into value add, but unfortunately, there will be non-value add. But minimizing the value add and maximizing the value add is what you're there to do. Just one small note. start with the biggest outcome that you can see for the smallest effort. And again, think about your warehouse. You'll all know what your biggest problems are. They may not be stated in a big company goal. They may not be stated by your management teams, but you will have in the back of your mind and go, that area really needs my focus, or that area really should be something I look at. Start with a small test. If you're new to value stream and you're not confident, just grab it, have a go. Start with something small. Look and start to do the Kaizen. How could I improve, make a small improvement and implement it? Get that on the floor with your workers. Do I have a toolbox every morning? Start to raise the stuff. Start to look at what's happening. But start with the biggest outcome for the smallest effort, and you will start to see then that your rewards are growing from it. Okay, that being said, those are the background tactics that we start to look at. Let's dive right in now to the two big parts. The first part today, wave planning and release. The second part will actually be picking. For those online who aren't familiar with the term, a wave is essentially a group of orders or order lines that we release into the warehouse to create a wave of work. So the pool of orders, there might be, think of individual orders that are in a big bucket, and I reach in with that bucket and I pull out several orders and I give those to a worker. That worker or operator is now off around the warehouse doing work. Now you just got to expand the concept by 1,000 orders and 1,000 workers, and you start to then see wave planning and wave release. How do I then control my wave flow is the art behind the science of wave planning. So here's a quick question. How does it impact picking? Well, the first thing is a real big question. How much planning are you leaving to your picker at picking time? And again, planning's huge. If I take a big jungle, I've got to plan my jungle. How am I going to go about doing it? If I plan it now, I save my picker at the end of the day. We'll get into a little bit more in the next section on picking as to what the impact of that really is. But ask yourself the question, what am I leaving to my picker that I could do today to increase their efficiency? Am I building a density? Can I build a density? Am I building an efficiency, and where can I build that efficiency? And as Adam said, the B2B2C is becoming ever more prevalent, right? So if you're not seeing this today, at some point, probably in the next 5, 10, or 15 years, you will start to see this. This is where, the total supply chain, not all of your order may come from your warehouse. Parts of it may come from, Southeast Asia. There might be a warehouse in Melbourne or a warehouse in Brisbane or a warehouse in Sydney that everything comes from. The impact out of that is cross-dock, So am I getting it from Southeast Asia? Is it coming to my warehouse? And do I therefore have to cross-dock? So as a wave planner, am I now looking to try and incorporate not just the picking of what's in my warehouse, but also the picking of stock coming in? From the point of view then of disparate ordering, I go right up to my customer. And does my customer like receiving 4 parts of an order? Or do they like receiving one box with everything in it? How are all the paperwork going? There's far-reaching consequences beyond the internal release of the wave in the warehouse. So start to get an idea of what the impact of this could be for your business. So we asked you a poll question. And right now, let's have a quick look at the answers to number 1. So the first poll question was to ask, do you use a WMS or an ERP solution? And here we go. So 55% of people use it as part of their ERP, 18 standalone, 21 have an in-house, and congratulations, 6% of people know who MacGyver is, to be absolutely proud of him. It's incredible how chewing gum and a paperclip can diffuse a nuclear device when it's in the hands of MacGyver. So thank you very much for that. We'll jump back to our presentation. What I'd like to do then is to go through the next section, looking at the WMS release steps. And from the poll, the vast chunk of the listeners out there have some form of WMS. So what this will do is start to, if you're not aware of the specific steps, start to show you the specific steps that are out there. If you don't have a WMS, which hopefully relatively few of us on the call, start to think about how you could use these steps in your manual environment and how you might be able to emulate some of those. From a wave planner release point, the first thing a WMS will do is create a pick request for each item, unit of measure, and quantity to pick for every line on the wave. And again, your ERP will be doing this. It's already done its soft allocation. When it comes to a WMS, it's now looking to execute and say, how do I do this? A pure WMS system already has that from an external host, and it will do exactly the same thing. The key part in that statement is the unit of measure. Now, that could simply be you have one unit of measure. It might be an each, or it might be a case, or it might simply be a pallet. But it's looking to break that down to be very, very granular for every single item, unit of measure, and quantity that. And that is essentially for this next step, because it then gets to go and allocate the pick request to a stock location somewhere in your warehouse. If it's a case, where do I pick my cases from? If it's an each, where do I pick my eaches from? Pallets, where do I pick my pallets from? Now, typically in a system, you'll have some form or some allowance for configuration of where to allocate that from. It might be very blunt, that literally just says go and find it somewhere in the warehouse. It might be very specific, that actually turns and says, okay, I want to pick cases from zone A. I want to pick my pallets from level F. I want to pick all my eaches from a pick module or next to my conveyor. The point of the configuration is how much control you now have over your warehouse, and therefore how much planning you can actually take to make your wave release quick. How can I get my orders out on time? Just taking a step back to webinar number 1, we said, how can we break up orders? How can we group orders? What are some of the things that you have in your order profile that you can go, you know what? One customer takes 30, 40, 50, 60% of my entire picking output. If I actually took that customer and I changed the way that I made my allocation for that customer go, how could I build efficiency? How could I build some density? So start to look at your warehouse again with these other, your homework and your knowledge in mind, and say, how is it that I could actually use that piece to my advantage? What can I take out from a picking pool? Who needs it today? Who needs it tomorrow? What do I need to be very, very urgent about right now? The next step will be to group the picks based on a processing requirement. So if you can imagine in your mind that I now have a request for a case pick to a certain location, and each pick for a certain location, and a pallet pick for a certain location, how do I then want to get that picked, basically? This is where you're starting to impact on your operators by saying, okay, I want to do a cluster pick by container. In that case, I need to group my each picks a certain way, and I need to group my cases in a different way. Batch by wave, just give me the whole damn lot. I'm going to drop it at a pack bench. If it's a discrete order pick, okay, great. Just that's then grouped by a single order. You may even be doing pick by trailer load. Your ERP system may integrate to a TMS or have some form of transport management capability. The next step after that for your WMS is it creates the pick task for each group of allocated pick tasks. So where we have a cluster pick by container, I now will set out a pick task to go and get that picked. I'm going to basically expect my picker to get out there, get his cartons together, potentially some labels, and run in a pick path. But you are already planning the execution of the work, which is critical to this step. On top of that, you may have some configurable task rules, which allow you then to tweak and change and move around how your pickers go about it. Coming back to webinar number 1, what can you find in your warehouse or your order profile or your shipping profile or something that says, hey, here's where I can gain an efficiency. If I got all these guys to do a task that was for this customer or for this type of person or for this truck or for this type of good, how can I make that quicker and how can I make it work a lot faster? The last thing that it may do, and this is only potential, is it may add additional details. If you're doing trailer loads or you're doing load IDs, it might go and create those. There might be an integration through to a TMS who plans the loads and comes back. It might create linked tasks, and they may even be related to the replenishment mentioned there. Do I then create my replenishment from my wave, but hold my replenishment until my picker is at the location, for example? But essentially, those are the 5 key main steps. Looking at those, start to get familiar with them and look at them in your warehouse from an operational point and say, okay, if my warehouse is going to take these steps, how can I use this system? How can I use this tool to make my warehouse more efficient? I often say to people, I give a builder a hammer, but he doesn't forget how to build the house, does he? No, he already knows how to build the house, and I give him a hammer to help him do it. And the WMS is the same. Your ERP is exactly the same. You're all supply chain professionals. You all live and breathe this environment every day. Therefore, use that knowledge, but use this as the tool to make that knowledge turn into efficiency. If I take away if I tell the builder to go and sit down and I put the hammer out on the site, The hammer doesn't magically stand up and start nailing up the house, does it? And the same as with your WMS. You need to be active, you need to be involved, because it's the two together that make your efficiency and make yourself a very lean and ongoing efficient warehouse. Here are several points too. Again, it's a thinking, this is a big thinking slide. So several other things to look at and contemplate when you're looking out at your warehouse. Do you pick from fixed pick locations? Are you looking to pick straight out of your current storage location, or should you use dynamic? Fixed pick's great if you have the same product that's picked every day and you want it in the same spot because that's where the pickers go to be efficient. Fantastic. It means replenishment, and if that's great and it makes you work, fantastic. Do I want to pick it out of its current storage location? If I do, will I be pulling half pallets out of a rack and leaving my rack in half full of pallets? Or do I have a sudden marketing push once a quarter, once a month, once a week, where I know I've got 16 to 20 items, but there'll be a different 16 to 20 items? I might want to move the 16 from this wave down to a predefined area and have my pickers walk through that once, so the picking's super efficient. And then once I move it down, all of the stock's gone, and as soon as it's gone, I can then do another wave and get a whole new different set of items down, and the picking's still efficient. So different ways to set that up. Ask yourself the question, and again, going back to pulling the roof off your warehouse and looking in, how many touches from storage to truck? Is there too few? Is there too many? What can I do to eliminate ones that add no value? Back to our value stream map. Is it worthwhile separating my each and case pick? We walk into a lot of warehouses. There's a lot of block stack. It's very simple for the operator to go, you know what? I will pick an each, a case, and a pallet from my block stack, and it works exceedingly well. It doesn't mean you have to. It just says, should you or could you? If you have a conveyor line, would it be easy then to put a case pick of a certain iron on a conveyor line where someone can very quickly just pick a case, put it on the conveyor, pick a case, put it on the conveyor? And each pick might then go and be picked from a separate area. If you see an opportunity for that, is it worthwhile going to your marketing department or sales department and saying, what does it actually cost us to upsell all our customers to a case pick? If it saves me, $5, $10, $15, $20 for a worker's time, I effectively put $5, $10, or $15 in the kitty for sales to go, actually, I can use that money to make it a case pick and save ourselves as a business time and cost. Should I cartonize with shipping labels? Are you a mature organization where you have item dimensions and volumetrics? Do I have standard carton sizes? Are all my items, will they fit within, 95% of them, will they fit within a standard carton? Can I do that efficiently? Have I got the setup and the structure? Can I actually have all my shipping information, and can I get it out there quick enough to get that on a label to get that efficiency? Because once I can send a picker out with the final shipping carton and they finish their pick, the carton can go straight to the shipping dock because it's ready to go. Which leads us right into the last one. Take a look at your process and how the impact of paperwork and labels actually affects it. If you're printing your pick lists up front, often they do become the pseudo packing list, in which case, if it works for you, great. If you're in an RF environment, do you need to print a packing list? Are you expected to send an invoice? Can you then start building a sort of a grounds roots, bottom-up response to management to say, hey, can we actually go to some of our bigger customers and say, do you really need paperwork with the goods? Do you need an invoice or just a packing slip? At the receiving end, what have they got? A storeman at a packing end, or a receiving end, loves a paper receiving slip because they can then tick off that it's correct. So do I need an invoice for that person? No, invoice has got to go to finance. What about my labeling? What's my transport like? Who's it getting sent to, and how's it going? But look at it from a process to say, look, I've got to plan this thing to be efficient. I've got to plan it to be effective. So how can the paperwork and labels be placed efficiently within that process? If I have pickers that drop it off at a pack bench, are my packers close to a printer? Is there a printer, a laser printer and a label printer at each bench? Do they have to turn around? Do they have to move? Does the picker now have to actually move to a separate point to actually grab a piece of paper? And how can you make that efficient, that travel time? And again, it's just a case of sitting there and looking at the warehouse that you've got, or the supply chains that you've got, the elements that you need, through these colored glasses and saying to yourself, right, what is it that I could do? And if you can do it, map it and have a go at it. Kaizen says small and frequent. So make small changes and make them frequent and see how you go. And test and measure and test and measure and test and measure. Right, now we get into picking. Oh, whew. How much work have we done just to get here? It's taken, about one and probably a half webinar before we finally get to the picking within the picking jungle. This is because the planning is so essential. But it is finally time to introduce you to the picker. And I must introduce you to one of my favorite concepts that I try and say to everybody that I meet. I want you to make the picker king. Now, as Adam says, I started out in the warehouse with an RF gun on a forklift. It's not because I thought I was a super picker and I think you should go out there and make all your pickers super people. It's not because, I think your pickers should arrive at 12 and leave at 1 and have an hour for lunch as every king does. It's because of the simple stat provided in the text there. He's a great guy online, Stuart Emmett. He wrote a book in 2005 called Excellence in Warehousing Management. Stuart's online. He's on LinkedIn, easily approachable. Go and have a chat with him about these numbers. In one example from one operation, picking costs were 43% of total labor activity, and labor was 60% of the total warehouse cost. So your picking could ultimately cost you somewhere between 15, maybe probably 20, 25, 30, even 35 or 40% of your total warehouse cost. If you want to tackle the biggest thing first, make the picker king. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to treat them to a buffet gourmet lunch every day, but what it is going to mean is that you're going to try and make the picking job as simple and as easy as possible. The next sort of few bullet points are quite wordy. I do appreciate there's going to be a lot of text on the screen. Now, we are going to give you these slides out, so don't be afraid that you need to write all these as they come down. But do write down your thoughts. If you come up with an idea or a thought, that jogs something in memory or prompts you to think of something, write that down, and we'll get you these slides to help you out later on. Firstly, does your picker use a forklift, a pallet jack, a trolley? What do they use to pick? Are they picking on a conveyor? How can you make that simpler? Is it a task they need to do? How do they move? Because the next one, how far do they travel and travel empty? I mean, it's the classic killer in a warehouse is travel. The tyranny of distance can be a killer. And remember, we're dealing with 43% of your total cost or potentially 30% of your overall actual budget. And again, all the classic ones there. Can we create a heat map? Can we move stuff to closest to the outbound, closest to the pack bench? How do we sort it? How do we pick it? Can you introduce some smaller pick zones? How can we send the pickers out there to do multiple tasks at one time? And the last one there, in conjunction with their equipment, again, I walk into a lot of warehouses and I've got to comment that some of the art that I see on trolleys is astounding. Someone's got an empty tape roll and they've taped it to the mast of a forklift, and that's where their RF is held in. Or they've a knife and a bit of cardboard, and they've created a wonderful tote holder on their trolley next to a conveyor situation. It doesn't take much to sit and go, actually, what do these guys need? What do they need to get their job done? Because when you get down to it, if they're halfway through a pick and they have to stop and go and grab a knife because they got to cut some wrap, or they've got to stop and they've got to go and get another plastic bag because they've run out, or they've got to stop and they've got to go and get a texter to write stuff on. Every time they stop, they basically are costing you money because they're their inefficiency to get their job done. Now, it doesn't have to be that it's a headcount issue at the end of the day. It can be a straight capacity issue. So start to look and say, what do they need? What do I expect of my pickers? And can I put that on their trolley? Can I put that on their pallet jack? Can I put that on their forklift somehow? How could I go about doing that? Doesn't cost much to get down to Bunnings and buy a few cable ties and a couple of those little garden tidies. Gets the trolleys and the little pallet jacks all nice and tidy. There's an area for everything and everything in its place, which when you start getting to 5S and 8 wastes, follows them through those lean thinking. Make replenishment pick ready. This is another one of my little I wouldn't say bugbears, but it's something I like to highlight to a lot of people. The classic situation where I'm picking on a ground floor at the bottom of a rack, and a replenishment forklift comes along and they grab the pallet from above it and they put it straight down, and then they go away. The picker turns up. They might have to pick a full case or an each or a few cases, but it's got plastic wrap. The picker now has to stop, get their knife, and they cut. Now the picker isn't going to probably cut all the way down and unwrap the pallet and get the plastic and put it somewhere and put it in a bin and make it all nice and tidy. They're just going to make a cut through the first layer, and they're going to grab what they need, and they're going to leave it there. Next picker comes along, and when the first layer is done, they've got to cut through the second layer, or maybe the third layer, the fourth layer, until finally they're at the bottom of the pallet. And usually they've wrapped all the plastic and it's at the back, so that at the time it comes to when the pallet's finished and the next guy comes along, you've got this plastic situation. If we make it the job of the replenishment guy to not only drop it down but make it clean, I've removed all excess cardboard, those little square L's that go on the side of a lot of pallets to keep them secure in transport. I've taken the plastic away. Do your value stream map on how much time that will actually save you to get your pickers working and to keep your warehouse clean. Can they cut flaps off boxes? So you're in a CLS, how can I make it pick ready? Can I put the totes on there? How do I pack it? It doesn't have to be a plastic tote. It could be a cardboard. How can I pack into cardboard so when my picker comes by, they fly by, they pick exactly what they need. It's at hand, it's on hand at a moment's notice. There's also not cardboard laying around all my warehouse where I'm kicking stuff around and trip hazards are created, or I'm running over things with trolleys and labels are all over the floor. How can we automate the task assignment in an RF environment? It's a lot simpler. The tasks just keep coming. But look at where the picker routes to. How can I make my picker come back to a point or finish at a point that's near the start of my operation, that they can drop off and they can pick up almost at once, just to help that speed that flow through. And a final one, just to kind of take your mind in a different direction. If you're in an RF environment, are they over-scanning? Are they scanning the location and then the item and then the lot and then the quantity? And just consider that if I make 10,000 scans a year and I save one scan, that might be 2 seconds, maybe 1 second. But that's either 10 or 20,000 seconds a year multiplied by your number of pickers. And when you're 2 minutes to 5 and the truck driver's in the thing, he's in his cab, he's ready to go, and you've got that last really final urgent bit that's just got to get onto that truck. How much would you kill for another 60 seconds, another 2 minutes, another 5 minutes? And again, they may be little things at the start, but go and look at your operation. Are you that time sensitive that you go, wow, you know what? We are actually a lot quicker today. We built some more capacity and we were able to now get our stuff out. Okay, let's take the big question. And the big question on everyone's lips is paper, RF, voice, or MHE or PTL, pick to light, or goods to person. Before we get into this, let's have a quick look at our second poll. And we find that 53% of everyone on the call today is paper-based, whereas only 37 RF scanning, 3 on voice, but 7 are on pick to light or goods to person. That's very interesting given the fact that most of you are on ERP. So let's take that then. Thank you very much. Let's take that then and let's talk through those differences. So paper versus RF. And remember, let's just start off right at the very top here. This is all last mile process confirmation. We've done all the planning. We've done all the preparation. We've got our waves out there. We've given them the pick tickets, or we've given them the task on the RF. This is only about last mile process confirmation. So it all comes down to these 3 things: accuracy versus efficiency versus cost. For 100 people that listen to this, we will get 100 different supply chains, 100 different warehouse configurations, and 100 different requirements. So look at your own warehouse, look at your own supply chain with these 3 things: accuracy, efficiency, and cost. Paper is very cheap. Surprisingly, paper is pretty accurate. I always find it pretty accurate. The quality of the store people on your operation typically leads to a good result with paper. What paper doesn't do is validate. So you may find that you have your 1 or 2% error rate. It might be 3 or 4% error rate, in which case paper is not validating. However, it's quick. It's easy to do. I can put more people at the process and print out another piece of paper. Voice system has its absolute sweet spot to cases on conveyor because I'm hands-free. I can do a full case and I can pick it. It's also very good in other situations around the size and the type of my material where I don't have to put down and pick up an RF gun because, again, my hands are free. Voice, however, has a little bit of limitation through your validation because it's more difficult. It's not that difficult, more difficult to validate through voice. And RF, of course, is your stock standard. RF is expensive. You start fitting out a crew of even 10, 20 or 30 people with RF, and suddenly your cost is going up. We dick across now to Pick to Light and GTP. And again, you are building fantastic logic in these systems, and they move very quickly. So for those who aren't aware of a goods to person, the idea is it will shuttle and basically bring forward all of the picks to one person standing at a bay at the end, but it will bring it to them in order that they need to do. So the picker is actually standing there static, but he's doing massive amounts of pick because it's pick 2, then pick 1, then pick 3, then pick 4, and box done and next. The GTP, while very efficient and highly accurate in certain areas, can't cope very well with anything ad hoc. If it's outside of the standard pick it and put it in a box, then you need the person to do it. The other part about a GTP is your cost. So the small businesses on the call are looking at GTP going, oh, Christmas would come if I could find one of those things. The other part to GTP Pick to Light is the reliability of your infrastructure. This even goes down to your RF, your access points. RF can be a little bit of a dark art. These days we've got it pretty well sorted out. There's lots of really great RF engineers out who come out and fix your problems. 20 years ago, you still found yourself with a few issues. But again, reliability is a trade-off. Here's one thing I always ask people: when will it get checked? And this goes down to the RF versus paper comment. If I have paper, but I have someone check my order, great, I'm validating it. So I have a validation, I have a check. But if I don't, will it be the end customer that ends up checking the goods? A friend of mine ordered something online. He ordered about 4 articles of clothing. They all turned up at his house. 1 article didn't fit. So who checked that order? Who checked that it was the right size? Who checked that it was what he ordered? No one. It was the end customer. A little point now, if you're dealing with liquids or heaped items or loose bulk, how accurate is accurate enough? A lot of that stuff you don't need to really get down to if you've got weight bridges, if you do other sorts of manufacturing type backflush. And just a little note here, the rise of industrial robots. This feeds into the symposium that's coming by Apex AU back in August, or coming up in August. We're looking into the future. We're looking at the rise of industrial robots and saying at some point, that the tactile ability of robots will start to play a bigger and bigger effect on where you're going. So we might have this debate today, and at the end of MHE/PTL/GTP, we might have /robot. So start to think about and start to, at least be aware and get exposed to some of the things that are going on around industrial robotics. Because what you think today might be good with RF or voice or paper, one of them might in the near future, and it could be near in a few years, but more likely the 10 to 15 year horizon, might actually start changing the way that we all deal with our supply chains. Let me finish now with a case study. We said in our marketing, what's that giraffe doing on my racking? Which was a little bit of a teaser for you guys to start to think about this. And the case study is General Motors. They combined their picking and consolidation together using symbol matching, and they removed RF from their picking flow. So looking through webinar 1, we started to challenge and question our flows. Looking through this webinar, we started to see how our planning will affect our outcomes. So here's what General Motors did. They have a process where they create a pick batch. And again, I do apologize about the wordiness. The slides will come out to you. So just start to then get an idea if this stems up any questions or thoughts in your mind. Write those down and we'll get these out to you for the detail. They create a pick batch of 24 parts. So this is the General Motors doing their parts picking out to their dealers. Pick labels are printed, but they're printed with a symbol on it. The picker then comes along, they grab a batch of labels, and each label's got a symbol on it. They then go out to their pick face. They do the picking on the pick tag. And when they've finished, they then take a trolley, and it might have anything up to 24 separate parts for up to 16 different dealers all over my trolley. They then take that out to the consolidation area, so it's the picker who wheels it out to consolidation. And the picker now matches the symbol on the pick ticket to the symbol on the box that they've got to sort it into. So remember back at the planning stage of wave release, when the pick tags are printed, the corresponding symbol for the dealers that are going into the boxes were also printed out. So the wave release person would hang up the pick tags and then go and label the boxes with the symbols. What this meant the picker had to do was pick up the pick tag, look at the symbol, and now I'm looking for the symbol along my box. We all know as human beings that we are visual creatures. We like pictures. If you're looking to buy a new Mercedes, you're not looking for a car to go by with the word Mercedes written on it. You're looking for the badge, or you're looking for the style, or you're looking for the car that you are now looking at. So General Motors took the same approach, and they said, why not do this? They took a lean methodology, and ultimately what they did is their errors fell from 1% to 2% down to 0.5%, which is incredible. Well, that's a saving. Plus, they removed RF and they got quicker. The efficiency in the pick rate was higher because the person simply had to go to it, look at a pick tag, grab parts, and put it on a trolley. This was so successful that the process was achieved using lean principles and went global. So the entire operation globally now operates like this. And big thanks to Greg McGee. He's the ex-director of after-sales supply chain GM Europe, General Motors Europe, for this information. So again, this just helps to put in your mind some of the things that you can do, some of the thoughts that you can do to look at how your warehouse goes and look at how you can start to think about the differences. Do I take something else? And again, we go back to webinar number 1. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. And that's when he achieved perfection. And the last part of this case, or this slide, is always remember, it's people plus process plus systems that move stock. So I know I've been guilty in the past, put my hand up, this isn't pointing fingers. I wanted to put everything in a system. I want to make the system the most perfect thing. I learned after a while that's a combination of the three. So use that information, look at your warehouse, look at your processes, look at your supply chains in a different way. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you at the next webinar where we will basically finish off effectively the outbound process with staging, shipping, and we've got a little surprise at the end of that webinar. And if anyone is in Melbourne next week, we will be at CMAT. Look for the IBS stand. From memory, it's H36, something like that, but it's over by the cafe and recreation area. I'll also be doing a presentation at CMAT on one of our clients in Europe who automated a cold storage. So with that, a final thanks from me, and hand you back to Peter to wrap up. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Lloyd. Appreciate that. And guys, we have the option for questions. You can lodge questions. You can lodge into our website under the email address that we have used to communicate with you, and you can put questions on there. Lloyd and Adam will be available to address him. You'll see on the screen there's an example, a screenshot. So when you put a question in, they will respond. Continue having a discussion on these topics. So thank you both, you, Adam and Lloyd. Just to remind you of our upcoming webinars, we have the next few available in July. There will be multi-echelon inventory optimization. That's also in series. That'll be the first of 3. August, we have lean and TWI's job relations. And September will be part 3 of this Pick the Jungle series. So just that reminder. Then also a quick reminder of the flyer that's available for you to download on our regional symposium here in Western Sydney, Navigating Your Supply Chain into the Future. Would invite you to download that and look at that, and if you're in a position not to attend, you can always send that on to any of your colleagues or people you may know. So thank you. We hope you enjoyed the live webinar. May I encourage you to seek out all the offerings we have, education and training available, which you can achieve your professional growth. There'll be an information pack that will be emailed out to you. We include free for you to review and use, and you will receive that at the email where you've registered that you will join us for future live webinars in 2016. Thank you.